Uncle Ron and stuff, episode 16, hunting and deer hunting specifically. I know hunting, you nasty person, you killing animals. I got to give you some ancestry first. My mom and my dad, their parents, they lived in the country. They didn't live in the city. They lived out in the country. And for a while, both of them were farmers. My mom's dad was, in fact, a farmer till he passed away. Now, my dad's dad, he became a house builder, a carpenter. Anyway, they lived out in the country and poor. They didn't have any money for anything. Farmers, you got to get your crop in, you got to pick your apples, you got to, sell your cattle, you got to whatever to get any money. So when it came to meat, the woods were full of squirrels, the fields were full of rabbits, and the forests and mountains were full of deer. So, and the streams were full of fish. So all you had, for a little or no money, you could go get fish and meat. And that's what they did. And it got passed down. When I was little, my father used to come home from deer hunting, and he'd have a great big old buck tied to the front fender of his car. I guess we people still do that, but that's what he did at the time. It was a sign of pride, and the more points you had on the buck's antlers, the bigger the pride. You got a good big one. Anyway, hunting was part of my ancestry from both sides of the family. My father had three brothers. They all hunted. We all hunted. I grew up on venison, squirrel, rabbit, turkey, trout, bass, perch. Those were the things we could, caught night crawlers at night. Didn't cost us anything. Flashlight battery maybe. And then we went fishing and we had food. I grew up, I don't remember meat from the store at all growing up. It was always venison. Anyway, at a very early age, I started rabbit hunting and squirrel hunting. And rabbit hunting particularly. There was a tradition on my father's side of the family at Thanksgiving. Uh, he and my dad and all of his brothers and their family, we'd all gather at my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving dinner. And it would be a giant turkey for all of us. But the tradition was afterwards, all the men went rabbit hunting. Now, they lived in the same area, the Shenandoah Valley, lived in the same area their whole life. So they knew all kinds of people everywhere that had fields, and sure, you can come out and hunt rabbits if you want to, or mountains. And my grandfather on my mother's side, he owned probably 300 acres, of which maybe a third of it was pasture and the rest of it was mountains and pretty good forest. So we had places to go, and on Thanksgiving Day, we always went rabbit hunting. So it'd be my grandfather, my father, his brothers, me, and as my brother got older, he would join the group as well. Well, I was probably 10 at the time, 11, something like that. So I had a 22 caliber single shot rifle that I had saved money for and bought. So if a rabbit didn't jump out as they walked along the field, it was my job to shoot the rabbit where he sat, and I would shoot him in the head. I know you go. Anyway, the normal deal was the rabbit would kick out and start running, and then there would be these men with shotguns, and they would, depending on where it was, we walked in a line, depending on where it was, who took the shot, and you know, everybody wore the hunting vests that you could tuck the rabbits in the back. And I don't know how many rabbits at any particular time, but a lot. Okay. But the real sort of traditional thing that I wanted to get to was deer hunting. Now, deer season opened, I think, in early November every year. And it was a tradition that my grandfather and all of his sons went deer hunting together. And that stayed on even after he couldn't go anymore. In fact, it stayed on. My last uncle passed away a couple years ago. And even up where he couldn't hardly walk, he was still driving his pickup truck out to where a high tension power line came across, and you had a wide open view. And he would still shoot deer at 100, 200 yards, and have a friend go get it, gut it, bring it back to his pickup truck for him. Anyway, deer hunting season was always a very unique, sort of traditional in my family, and maybe in many others as well. Again, everybody got together in some way or another. It wasn't uncommon for that to be a 3-day episode. What happens was deer season maybe opened on a Monday, so everybody would leave on a Friday, take their RVs, their campers, their tents to wherever they were going to gather or set up, and then they had a couple days of a lot of alcohol and always bragging. Well, my Canadian Mist is better than your Johnny Walker Red or whatever, and they would sit around and drink these things and get. It was an incredible brotherhood thing that they had. They really did, and a couple times I got to sit in on it and stayed quiet most of the time. There was one time it was funny. We were all in this RV. I don't know where we were, and I was older then, and I would go outside periodically while they were drinking their alcohol, smoke a joint. And my one uncle smoked a pipe, so I got sort of tired of going out in the cold. So one time I just pulled out my bag and said, you don't mind, I'm going to smoke some pot right here. And they all looked at me funny. And my uncle with the pipe said, well, load it up. So I did. And he's puffing away on it, big clouds of marijuana smoke everywhere. He says, well, I don't know. Anyway, leading up to the weeks before deer season opened, we would all get together, and they had four-wheel drive vehicles. My father had an old Army Jeep, and they would pick an area, and we'd drive this Jeep way back up in the mountains. There was no road, in between trees and over rocks, and get way back in there. And what we were doing was what our family called Snouse, Snouse, for deer sign or any deer in this area. Find deer trails. Find what's the official word for it? Deer. I can't think of the word. Deer feces, deer poop, scat, deer scat. And maybe where a buck had rubbed his antlers, velvet off of his antlers, on a tree, on a small sapling, usually. Now, once in a while, we would run across where some buck had scraped his antlers against a pretty good-sized tree, and everybody thought, well, there's a bragger for you. I mean, come on, that tree is huge for him to be doing that. But we would, you know, my father, all of his brothers, my grandfather, my brother, and I, we'd all go stomping through the woods, and I don't mean stomp. That group of people could walk miles and never make a sound. I'm not talking about talking. I'm talking about they didn't make a sound, period. I learned how to walk in the woods and creep up on anything. Not a limb, not snap, not a twig snap, not a leaf rustle. And walking on moss and all sorts of things. So we would spend the day out in the woods, and it was, camaraderie of a unique nature. And there were conversations. Actually, my uncles would talk to me, and I'd be 10, 12, 13, so whatever. I would talk to them. It was interesting, manly sort of camaraderie. Anyway, after the snousing, there was always stop at some local tavern. I'm talking about out in the country now, so these would be little dives, serve brew, and that was about it. They didn't have any food, as I remember, when nobody ever ate anything. We'd have a brewski or two, and when I got old enough, I participated in that. Okay, so venison was the meat, and my one of my uncles had a freezer in his basement, and he probably had 40, 50, 60, 100 pounds of venison in there at any one time. My grandfather, now he claimed that he had eaten everything that slithered or whatever. He used to have groundhogs out in the field behind his house, and he shot them and ate them. He's the only one I know that ate groundhog. But he claims he'd also had blackbird pie. Now, I don't know about that. I never hunted blackbirds for meat. But venison, it was free. Why do you go to a butcher when you can do it yourself? And we were all poor. We didn't have any money to be spending whatever it was per pound for ground meat. And venison was a whole lot better for you, and it still is than cow burgers. Anyway, uh, this tradition of going out on a weekend, setting up camp, starting a fire, drinking brewskis or whatever whiskey they had brought along, getting all lit up, and then cooking food, and it would be, they were three-quarters lit by the time they started that, and talking and joking and laughing, and it was, and then the next morning, of course, at before daybreak, at 4 a.m., I don't know, early, everybody get up and head out, and in the dark to go where you were gonna uh, stand or set up for a while, and usually you try to find a deer trail where deer, and they do have trails in the woods, uh, where there would be a deer trail and they might come by you while you were there. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff to hunting, and I can't get into all that. Uh, if the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, the deer could smell you, especially if you're like me and I smoke cigarettes, they could smell it. Or if you made too much noise, they could hear you. I heard lots of deer while I was in the mountains over the years hunting them, and they could somehow sensed I was there. Now they may have that magical sixth sense. Something wasn't right. And they knew it wasn't right. But they could sort of laugh at me. They would snort and paw the ground and stuff like that, which always pissed me off. Like, I'm here. Um, when I was really young, first deer hunt I ever went on, uh, out standing with my father. He was 20 feet away or so behind a tree, and we were watching this deer trail. And up came these two good-sized does, you know. And at that particular time, and maybe still true today, you are not allowed to shoot does or females during hunting season except for the very last day. And I think the idea was, and it's you think about it, it's cultural. Why do we send men to war? One man can impregnate a lot of women, you know, but or one buck can impregnate a lot of female deer, but not the other way around. So you were going to try to maintain the population by saving as many does as you could. Now that may have changed over the years because your population got out of hand. I don't know whether it was hunters dropped off or there are a lot of areas that don't allow hunting. For instance, where I live here, you're not allowed to hunt in the area. You know, you, so they get out of population goes out of bounds. Um, Even in Yellowstone, I think they allow hunting of various animals now because it ecologically it doesn't balance anymore. Anyway, I'm standing by this tree, and my father's over there. These two does come up, and they're like 30 feet away, 40 feet away. I mean, it was a terrible, bad way to say it. Was kill. I never called rabbits, squirrels, deer game. You hear people say, well, we're going game hunting. I never got to. I don't know what the game is about. Yeah, for me, if I could get really close to a deer and them not know I'm there, that was fun. And take pictures of them, prove that you got that close and they didn't know you were there. Could have, thrown a rock at them that close. Anyway, I bring my rifle up to my shoulder to shoot one of these does, and he looks over at me and shakes his head no. And I think this was the last day of the season, and it was legal. But no, first first kill for the son's got to be a buck. Another tradition had to be. Couldn't no. So I don't know, rightly or wrongly, I have never killed a deer. I had a time or two that maybe I could have, uh, but it didn't turn out, and that's okay with me. As they always said, the work always starts after you kill the animal, and then you got to gut it. You got to pull it from wherever it is back to where your car or truck is or camp, and that could be miles away. It's where all the hard work starts. Part of the tradition, though, and again, a lot of traditions in my family related to deer hunting. One of them was that if you gutted the deer out in the mountains, you always came back and showed the bloody handkerchief that you carried, because you carried a handkerchief to get the blood off your hands after you did the gutting. Okay, so you always would show that, and it seemed to me maybe I made it up or it was real that there would be these handkerchiefs hanging outside of a camp that indicated deer kills. And of course, the deer were strung up on tripods to bleed out properly. You had to do that. Uh, and so it was pretty obvious somebody had been successful. Um, the other aspect, we would often go to my grandfather's, my mom's dad. And again, he owned like 300 acres and nice set of woods. And at one time, it was deer all over the place. I do remember going out in the evenings in the fields in a car with my dad had a spotlight on his car, and it was not uncommon to see 20, 30 deer in a herd grazing in that field. Anyway, we would go up there and spend the night. They had enough rooms, and everybody would spend the night. And then we'd all go hunting. Now it's my grandfather on both sides, and my dad and his brothers, and it's also my mom's had three brothers. Yeah, they'd all be there. So this huge group would go out for the day, and my grandfather would go with one group, and I would go with my dad, and so on and so on. So tradition on that side of the family was that for hunting, you bought yourself a brand new, spanking perfect flannel shirt, and you wore it when you hunted. Okay. Now, after the day's hunt was over, at the dinner table, it was come to Jesus meeting time, and did anybody get a shot today? If you had shot and missed, there was no blood trail, you looked, no blood trail, you missed. Then the tradition was every other hunter got to take their big old knife out, and everybody had a big sharp knife because you had to gut these things out in the woods. They would take their knife and cut a piece out of that brand new flannel shirt. Now, my grandfather on my mom's side, my grandfather Van, if you will, yeah, he used to drink when he hunted. Now, I don't think he ever bought a drop of liquor, but if anybody had it, he would drink it. Okay, so he was never serious. He didn't. I don't think he even cared for hunting. To be honest with you, he just liked the camaraderie of everybody being there on his land and having a good time. And my grandmother Van, she could cook up a storm of stuff. So breakfast was three different kinds of meat and potatoes and eggs and of all kinds, scrambled sunny side up, hard boiled. It was fabulous. Okay. So anyway, everybody would start cutting hunks out of this shirt. Well, my grandfather, whether he did or not, I don't know, but he always was missing. Every year he missed. Every year his brand new flannel shirt you couldn't wear it anymore. There was so many hunks had been cut out of it. Now, I don't know if anybody else ever did that or not. I just know that may be unique to my family. I don't know. I know the word snouse, which I brought up and said, was we're going to go out early and look around for deer sign. We're going to snouse an area to see if it might be a good area. Deer might be in this area. Good place to hunt when deer season opens. Now, I wrote an article about snouse, and I got an email from some university, and they were building what's called a colloquial dictionary. Various words are sometimes only known in certain regions of the United States. Maybe it came out of, the immigrants that came into that area, and some twisting of some German word or Dutch word or whatever. In that particular case, they wanted to know what I knew about the word, what did it mean to me, and so I provided that, and they said it was going to go in the dictionary. And I think after they contacted me, and there were others, and it did have a German descent to it, mainly up in Ohio. Apparently a lot of my genetic or the genetic material that makes up me made its way into the Ohio area. And so that word, by genetic memory or otherwise, got carried up there. Anyway, hunting was a big part of my growing up. Yes, I had guns. I knew how to shoot. I used shotguns and rifles. Everyone on both sides of the family, my Uncle Bob and my Uncle Donald, who were my mother's brothers, everybody was a good shot. Now, braggart, I don't know. My dad was considered the best of the group. Uh, I never went to a turkey shoot with them. They did. They went all the time. I don't know. But with a scope, he was a good shot. I mean, 100 yards open sight was not out of the realm of possibility for him. I don't remember him saying he ever missed. Now, he might have wounded him, but he had a blood trail and he followed it and, found the. But he was pretty good at it. I inherited the good shooting. I was pretty good at one time. Uh, but and I have to confess, I killed a lot of rabbits and I killed a whole lot more squirrels. In fact, I think that's why the squirrels around here or any place I've ever lived always try to stay away from me because they can smell it. You ate my great 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 nephew or something, brother. I don't know what it is. Anyway, there were all kinds of traditions, and it was a camaraderie more than anything. My father really looked forward to November and getting together with his brothers, and he had such a great time. He really did. They all did. Uh, and having a couple drinks and a lot of laughs. And hunting was a secondary thing, but it did keep us fed. There was, I grew up, I could say, I don't know, maybe I was 15. I might have eaten the first real cow in a McDonald's hamburger, perhaps. I know that sounds strange, but I don't think I had any kind of cow meat before that. I had duck a couple times. His grandfather had ducks on his farm. I don't think I ever ate pigeon. But anyway, we hunted. It was a tradition. The word snouse, the idea of cutting a piece of flannel out of a shirt if you missed. I don't know if anybody else shares those traditions or had that in their family or not. I'm actually proud of the family. They took care of themselves. Besides growing the crops and picking the peaches and having orchards, all that sort of thing, they were kind of off the grid in that sense. And again, uh, you know, it was free. All you had to do was go out there and be smart enough, crafty enough, clever enough to take down a deer, which you could get, I don't know, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds of meat out of. And that would cost, $100 or more at the time, at least, for that amount of meat. Anyway, that's about as much as I got on hunting and deer hunting. There's a lot of other stuff. I haven't given you any clue about what hunting is actually about and how you can do it or not do it. It's not as simple as carrying a gun out in the woods, believe me. That's not it. Finally, I got one more episode, one more piece I got to tell you about, and that is I got lost one time. I have, with my father, we had gone up, and he owned some mountain land, and we used to hunt that. It bordered a national forest, a lot of national forest. And I had worked my way back up the side of this mountain, and I had gotten up on top. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe the deer all get scared and run up there, because of the hunters down below, and I'd just wait for them to come up to me. How the hell I was going to get them out of there, I don't know. But anyway, I'm way up on top. It got clouded over. And in fact, the thicket up there of what's called mountain laurel, and it's like 4 or 5 feet tall. You can't see nothing. Even if there were 40 deer in there, I'm not sure I could see them. But I got the whiff of something, and I'm sure it was a bear. I didn't know it till the time, but you can smell them because they fur gets all knotty. They don't clean. They have bears on TV with advertising Charmin bathroom tissue or something. I can understand the bear idea because they got fur all over their ass, and in the mountains and the woods, I don't think they rub that stuff off, so they can smell them. Anyway, I was concerned, but I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I realized I had no clue how I got where I was or where the road was or anything. Oh, well, okay, look on the tree. The moss will grow on the north side of the tree. Well, where I was, there was moss growing on every side of the tree. No sun. Couldn't orient. Well, the sun comes up in the east, goes down the west. Nope. Didn't have a compass. Didn't have a cell phone. Didn't have a radio. And it didn't concern me right away, but if I went in the wrong direction, all I was going to do was go deeper and deeper into the national forest, which extended for miles. And I didn't like the idea of them having to send out a rescue party for me. That was going to be really embarrassing all around. I wasn't going to die out there. I knew that. That wasn't the issue. It was just going to be highly embarrassing. Get lost in the woods. Anyway, in the end, I got out, and the only way I could do it was I stopped and listened. And way off faint, I could think I could hear a car. And I had come off a road, so I knew there was one around someplace. And I heard faint sound of the car. So I thought it was coming from a certain direction, but sounds in the forest and the mountains and the ridges can echo and be deceiving. So I would walk, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet, wait again, listen for sounds. I would hear it, and anyway, I finally made it down to the road. I hadn't been on the road very long, and I started walking toward where I knew my father had parked the car and so on. And he come driving up, and it was almost dark. And I got in, and he didn't really say anything. I think he knew what had happened. I mean, I know he knew what had happened. And he said, well, don't tell anybody, okay? That's enough for this one. Spousal unit is coming home. Bye-bye.